You wake up, but everything still feels heavy. The noise in your head doesn't stop, the emptiness doesn't fade, and the meaning you were promised never arrives. You scroll through mantras, affirmations, and rituals, but nothing reaches the part of you that's still breaking. You tell yourself you're evolving, yet deep down it feels more like something inside you is dying. And maybe that's because awakening was never meant to feel like birth. It was meant to feel like remembering. The truth most people are too afraid to say aloud is that awakening rarely begins in light. It begins in collapse. It starts when the life you've built feels like a costume you can no longer wear. When the identity you've clung to cracks under its own weight. It's the job that no longer makes sense. The relationship that feels like a stranger's story. The mirror that reflects a face you don't recognize. The spiritual world sells awakening as a euphoric rebirth, a blissful expansion. But for most, it's a slow unraveling, a painful realization that the person you thought you were is mostly programming. The routines, the ambitions, even the preferences you believed were yours, were often inherited, shaped by childhood trauma, social conditioning, and silent fears. Awakening is the moment that mask begins to rot, and you are forced to ask, if I am not this, then who am I? This question doesn't land gently. It doesn't arrive as wisdom. It rips through your certainty like a storm. Because the human mind is addicted to familiarity, even if that familiarity is suffering, it would rather repeat the same painful cycles than step into the unknown. That's why when you first awaken, your subconscious fights back. It clings to the old story, replaying your past like a broken record. It tells you that this discomfort means you're failing, but in truth, it means you're shedding. Awakening isn't a sign that something's wrong with you. It's a sign that your false self is dying. It's here, in this psychic dismantling, that most people give up. They confuse the death of the false self with their own destruction. They assume that if they no longer identify with their trauma, their achievements, or their roles, there will be nothing left. But this is the oldest illusion, that you are the sum of what has happened to you. In reality, you are the witness of it all. You are the consciousness that has always been present beneath the noise. The pain you're experiencing isn't punishment, it's excavation. The ground is trembling not to bury you, but to reveal the foundation that has been waiting underneath. Think back to your childhood, the years before you were taught what was acceptable or possible, before shame trained you to shrink, before fear taught you to calculate every move. There was a version of you then that didn't ask for permission to exist. That version isn't gone, it's buried, and each layer of awakening strips away the debris that's kept it hidden. When you feel lost, it's not because you've gone astray, it's because you're walking back toward the origin. And this is why awakening is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. The child who trusted their curiosity, the soul that recognized itself in everything, the consciousness that existed before language carved reality into pieces. You are not evolving into your higher self, you are dissolving what was never truly you. What feels like falling apart is really the scaffolding of illusion collapsing. What feels like confusion is the clearing of space for something ancient to re-emerge. The paradox is that the deeper you go into this unraveling, the closer you come to a peace that has nothing to do with control. The journey stops being about fixing or improving yourself and becomes about remembering and trusting that you were whole before you were broken. Each breakdown is a breadcrumb, each tear a thread pulling you home. The storm is not here to destroy you. It is here to wake you from the dream of who you were never meant to be. So, if you are standing in that chaos now, unsure, exhausted, disoriented, know this, you are not failing, you are remembering, and this pain you feel is not the end of the path, it is the doorway you've been searching for all along. Most people run from this doorway because it doesn't look like liberation, it looks like loss. It asks you to surrender everything you've used to define yourself, the roles you've played, the stories you've repeated, the defenses you've built around your heart. It asks you to walk into the fire of uncertainty without knowing who you'll be on the other side. And yet, this is the only way home. The soul cannot awaken in a space already filled with identities. It awakens when there is enough silence for it to speak. You might notice that as you move deeper into this remembering, the world around you starts to feel increasingly foreign. Conversations that once energized you now feel empty. Ambitions that once drove you now seem irrelevant. Even relationships may begin to dissolve, not because you've become distant or cold, but because the vibration you carry is shifting. What once resonated with your false self can no longer sustain the frequency of your awakening. It's not rejection, it's resonance recalibrating itself. And although it can feel isolating, this stage is not a punishment, it's an initiation. It's also here that the subconscious tries its last defense, distraction. It will flood you with thoughts, doubts, and what-ifs. It will seduce you with the idea of returning to the familiar, convincing you that growth means building a new version of the same old self. But if you pay close attention, you'll notice something profound. Every time you stop trying to become, a deep stillness surfaces, and in that stillness, something ancient stirs. That stirring is not creation, it's memory. It's the part of you that existed before you learned to chase, before you learned to strive, before you believed you had to earn your place in the world. We often confuse awakening with effort, as if the highest truth is something we must reach for, but the truth is already here. It has always been here, humming beneath the noise of our striving. The more you strip away, the closer you get. The more you release, the more you remember. Imagine peeling away layers of paint on an old wall. Each layer was added by someone else, parents, teachers, lovers, society. And when the last layer falls away, you see the original surface, untouched, unspoiled, infinite. That surface is who you are, and awakening is simply the process of uncovering it. Here's the paradox most seekers miss. You cannot remember your true self while clinging to the false one. This is why the journey hurts. It's why awakening often feels like betrayal. Betrayal of your conditioning, betrayal of your ego, betrayal of the life you thought you wanted. But it's not betrayal, it's reclamation. The pain is not a sign that you're breaking down, it's a sign that you're breaking free. The self you built to survive must die for the self you were born to be. That death is not cruelty, it's mercy. And yet, even as you shed, even as you dismantle, even as you grieve the person you thought you were, something miraculous begins to happen. You start to sense the quiet presence beneath it all. The awareness that has never changed, the essence that has witnessed every incarnation of you without ever becoming them. It's the part of you that cannot be improved or diminished because it was never incomplete to begin with. And once you touch that, the whole game changes. Awakening stops being a quest and becomes a homecoming. The seeker dissolves because there's nothing left to seek. At this point, life itself transforms. Choices no longer stem from fear or validation. They arise naturally from the deeper current of who you are. Relationships stop being about filling voids and become sacred mirrors of mutual remembrance. Even pain changes its texture. It no longer feels like punishment but guidance. An invitation to look deeper, to soften more, to return closer to the center. The awakening you once thought was a destination reveals itself as a return. Not forward into something new, but inward into something eternal. And maybe that's the most profound realization of all. You were never becoming anything. You were always being. All the searching, all the suffering, all the striving, they were not mistakes. They were part of the spiral path leading you back to the origin. You are not discovering the truth. You are remembering it. And the deeper you go into that remembrance, the more you realize that nothing was ever lost. You only forgot. There's a moment, subtle but irreversible, when this truth begins to seep into every fiber of your being. It's the moment when striving collapses under its own weight, when the desperate need to fix yourself disintegrates, and a deeper knowing rises in its place. You begin to see that the very act of seeking was always rooted in the illusion that something was missing. But how could anything be missing from that which is infinite? The soul does not evolve toward completeness. It awakens to the completeness that has always been there. Like a wave realizing it was never separate from the ocean, you remember that the you who was searching was never apart from the truth it sought. Yet this realization is often preceded by chaos. Before the remembering comes a kind of psychic earthquake. Everything that is not you trembles, fractures, and falls apart. Identities you've worn like armor start to feel heavy and false. Goals that once consumed you suddenly seem meaningless. Even your prayers change. They stop being pleas for change and become invitations for clarity. This unraveling is not a mistake. It's the soul's way of dismantling the scaffolding you built around your light. It's terrifying to watch the structures collapse, but they were never your home. They were only walls built by fear. Your breakdown is not an ending. It is the removal of everything that was never truly you. In this space between destruction and emergence, the ego will try to bargain. It will cling to familiar pain because pain, at least, feels known. It will whisper that if you let go of these old identities, there will be nothing left. But there's a deeper voice beneath that noise, a quieter, older voice that doesn't speak in fear but in memory. It doesn't promise that you will become something greater. It reminds you that you already are. It doesn't tell you to chase enlightenment. It shows you that you've never left it. This is the voice of the original self, the one that existed before language, before conditioning, before the first wound ever told you that you were not enough. It's here that subconscious reprogramming takes on its deepest meaning. It's not about installing new beliefs to overwrite the old. It's about dissolving the entire architecture of falsehood so that truth can breathe again. Trauma, in this context, is not an obstacle but a messenger, a coded memory of where you abandoned yourself. Every time you revisit those wounds, not to judge them but to understand them, you reclaim another fragment of the soul that was scattered. And as those fragments return, you realize they were never broken pieces. They were pieces of a whole that had simply forgotten its shape. This is why awakening cannot be rushed. It's not a race to transcend suffering. It's a slow, sacred process of reuniting with every part of yourself you exiled. The anger you buried, it was your power in disguise. The shame you carried, it was your innocence calling to be seen. The grief you resisted, it was love, waiting patiently beneath the surface. To awaken is to walk back through every room of your inner house and turn on the lights. And as you do, the monsters you feared reveal themselves as misunderstood guardians, each one guiding you back to the memory of who you were before the forgetting. If you pause here, truly pause, and feel into the depth of this process, you might realize that nothing external has changed. The world is still chaotic. People are still unpredictable. Life is still uncertain. And yet something profound has shifted inside you. The need for control dissolves. The craving for certainty loses its grip. Instead of building safety out of illusion, you begin to trust the intelligence of the unknown. This is the essence of awakening. Not that you rise above life, but that you remember you were never apart from its sacred rhythm. And this remembrance has consequences. It reconfigures the way you move through the world. You stop defining yourself by what happened to you and start remembering who was there all along. You stop seeing healing as a future goal and start experiencing it as a present reality. You stop searching for answers out there and start listening to the ancient wisdom that has always whispered within. This is not passive acceptance. It is radical embodiment. It is the soul reclaiming its throne from the illusions that once ruled your mind. The truth is, you were never broken, you were never lost, and you were never unworthy of the peace you crave. The only thing that ever separated you from that truth was the story that said you were something less. Awakening does not erase the story, it reveals the storyteller. It shows you that the one reading the script was never defined by the script itself. And once you see that, you're free, not because you've become something new, but because you've remembered what you were before the story even began. It's here, in the space beyond stories, that the deepest form of healing begins. Not the kind of healing that patches wounds or numbs pain, but the kind that dissolves the illusion of separation entirely. The old self, with its endless strategies for control, starts to fall silent. The inner critic loses its authority. The heavy armor you built around your heart becomes unnecessary. And it slips off without a fight. In its place there is only presence, vast, patient, immeasurable. It does not rush, it does not strive, it simply remembers, and in that remembrance you feel the unshakable truth that nothing was ever wrong with you, nothing needed fixing. All that was ever required was to come home. This is why so many who begin their awakening journey become disillusioned along the way. They expected fireworks, visions, instant peace, but instead they are met with silence, emptiness, even despair, and yet that emptiness is not a failure. It is the clearing away of everything that is not real. It is the pause before the memory returns. In the same way that a forest must burn to be reborn, the false self must dissolve to reveal the eternal self beneath. The fire is not punishment. It is purification. The soul does not evolve by adding more. It awakens by shedding what was never truly itself. But the mind resists this simplicity. It wants meaning. It wants progress. It wants a narrative it can measure and control. That's why awakening often feels like dying, because the mind cannot comprehend a transformation that doesn't revolve around doing. And yet, in this sacred stillness, you realize the paradox. You do not transform by trying to become. You transform by remembering you already are. Every attempt to grasp, to chase, to define pulls you further from the truth. But every breath you take in surrender brings you closer to the essence that never left. As this awareness deepens, a strange thing begins to happen. You stop fearing the parts of yourself you once despised. The rage, the jealousy, the grief, the shame. You no longer see them as enemies, but as exiled children of your own being, returning home after a long journey. You welcome them, and in doing so, they lose their power to harm you. They were never trying to destroy you. They were trying to show you where love was missing. They were never meant to be suppressed. They were meant to be embraced. Healing then becomes an act of radical compassion, a homecoming, not a battle. And in that homecoming, your relationship with the external world transforms as well. No longer desperate for validation, you stop chasing approval that was never yours to earn. No longer terrified of loss, you stop clinging to things that were never meant to stay. You begin to live not from fear, but from fullness, a fullness that is not dependent on outcomes, identities, or achievements. Life stops being a performance and becomes an expression. Relationships stop being negotiations and become reflections. Even pain stops being a threat and becomes a teacher. There is profound freedom in this. It is not the freedom to escape life, but the freedom to meet it exactly as it is, with an open heart and an unshakable center. You no longer need to know where the path leads because you trust the intelligence that walks it. You no longer need certainty because you have found something deeper. Faith, not in an idea or belief, but in the living truth of your own being. And from this space, even the unknown becomes a sacred ally, not a source of fear. You are no longer trying to become awakened. You are simply allowing the eternal self to lead. And so the question shifts from, how do I awaken, to what have I forgotten? It shifts from, how do I become whole, to where have I denied my wholeness? It shifts from seeking answers outside to listening deeply within, because the journey was never about reaching something far away. It was always about turning inward, layer by layer, memory by memory, until you remember that you were never anything less than infinite. You are not here to find yourself. You are here to remember that you were never lost. And when that remembrance fully lands, not just as an idea, but as a living, breathing truth, everything changes without anything needing to. You still inhabit the same body. You still live in the same world. Challenges still arise, but you meet them from a space that cannot be shaken. The old cycles lose their grip. The old stories dissolve before they can define you. And the self you were always meant to be, not a new self but the original one, steps forward, radiant and whole. This is awakening, not an arrival but a return, not a destination but a homecoming. And yet, as profound as that realization is, the mind will still try to pull you back into its labyrinth. It will whisper that you're not there yet, that you still have work to do, that you must become something more before you can finally rest. It will tempt you with new spiritual identities, new philosophies, new practices, all of them disguised as evolution but secretly designed to keep you searching. That's because the mind's survival depends on the illusion of distance. If you realize that what you seek is already here, its authority dissolves. But every time you choose to pause, every time you choose to be instead of become, the illusion loses its grip a little more. This is the hidden paradox of the awakening path. The more you try to awaken, the more you reinforce the idea that you are asleep. The harder you strive to become whole, the more you affirm the belief that you are broken. But the moment you stop striving, not in apathy but in radical acceptance, you discover that wholeness was never missing. It was the foundation beneath every experience, even the painful ones. It was present in the heartbreak, in the confusion, in the darkness. It was not hiding from you. It was holding you the entire time. The truth doesn't appear when you chase it. It appears when you stop running from it. Think of the moments when you felt most lost, when life stripped you of everything you thought you were. Perhaps it was the end of a relationship, the collapse of a dream, or the disorienting emptiness that followed a major achievement. In those moments, you weren't being punished, you were being guided. The identity you had built was too small to hold the vastness of who you really are, and so it had to fall apart. The pain wasn't a barrier to awakening, it was the doorway. But because we are taught to fear endings, we resist them. We patch up the cracks instead of walking through them. Every soul, at some point, reaches a breaking point where the old story no longer fits. And when that happens, you will feel like everything is falling apart. But what's truly happening is that everything false is falling away. This is not destruction, it's revelation. Like a sculpture emerging from a block of marble, the real you is revealed by removing everything that isn't you. It is a process of subtraction, not addition. And though it feels like loss, it is the deepest form of liberation. The pieces that crumble are not your essence, they are the masks you outgrew. Yet the fear of letting go runs deep, because the false self has been your shield. It has protected you from rejection, from failure, from vulnerability. It has given you a sense of control in a chaotic world. And so, even when you know it's time to release it, part of you clings to it. But this is the final threshold on the path of remembrance, the willingness to trust that what you are beneath the mask is stronger than anything the mask was protecting you from. To trust that the soul doesn't need armor, it is the armor. It doesn't need validation, it is the source of worth itself. Here lies the heart of true awakening. It's not about becoming invincible. It's about becoming transparent. It's not about building more layers. It's about dissolving them. And in that transparency, life itself becomes sacred again. Ordinary moments reveal their depth. The mundane becomes miraculous. Even suffering transforms into wisdom because you no longer see it as an enemy, but as a teacher. You realize that awakening was never meant to take you out of the human experience. It was meant to bring you deeper into it. From this vantage point, even the wounds you once resented become holy. They were the cracks through which the light entered. They were the maps that guided you home. And though the journey felt long and chaotic, you see now that it could never have been any other way. Every detour, every heartbreak, every night you thought you'd never survive, they were all essential to this remembering. They weren't obstacles. They were initiation rites. What you called suffering was the soul's way of waking you up. And so the war you were fighting ends not with a victory, but with a surrender. Not with a triumphant shout, but with a quiet exhale. You lay down the weapons you once used against yourself, judgment, shame, resistance, and in their place you pick up nothing at all. Because there is nothing left to fight. The self you were searching for has been here all along, waiting patiently for you to stop running. And as you stand in that stillness, you realize you were never becoming awakened. You were always being remembered. And in that stillness, something profound begins to unfold. A truth so subtle that the mind almost misses it, yet so powerful that it rearranges everything. The self you thought you needed to find is not a future destination. It is the awareness silently observing every step you've taken. It is the presence beneath every thought, the witness behind every emotion. and it was never asleep. It was never lost. What was asleep was your identification with everything that was never truly you. The soul doesn't awaken. It remembers it was never asleep. This is why so many people on the so-called spiritual path feel stuck. They chase enlightenment as if it were a finish line, as if awakening were a mountain they could conquer with enough meditation, rituals, or books. But the irony is that every attempt to achieve awakening only reinforces the illusion that it's not already here. It's like searching for your glasses while they're already on your face. The more desperately you look, the more invisible they become. The soul is the same. The harder you try to grasp it, the more it slips through your fingers because it is not something to grasp. It is the one who grasps. This is why the most profound shifts often happen not in moments of effort, but in moments of collapse. When you are too tired to keep striving, too broken to keep building, too lost to keep searching, that's when the real you emerges. Not because you found it, but because the noise finally stopped long enough for you to hear it. In that silence, you realize that awakening is not about becoming extraordinary. It is about becoming deeply, radically ordinary, so present, so unmasked, that the divine can finally be seen in the mundane. And from that state, even the idea of healing changes. Healing is no longer about fixing something that's broken. It's about remembering that nothing essential was ever damaged. The traumas that shaped you, the pain that carved you, the identities you clung to, they were never proof of your weakness. They were the soil from which strength, compassion, and wisdom grew. Your scars are not signs of imperfection. They are sacred inscriptions of remembrance, proof that even in your darkest moments, something deeper refused to die. But make no mistake, this remembrance is not a passive process. It demands courage, because to remember who you are, you must be willing to forget everything you are not. You must be willing to release the roles that once gave you safety, the beliefs that once felt like truth, the narratives that once defined your worth. And that release will feel like death. In many ways, it is death. The death of false identity, the death of illusion, the death of everything you thought you needed to be. Yet on the other side of that death, you find life. Not the fragile life of a constructed self, but the eternal life of what has always been. This is why awakening often feels more like falling apart than coming together. It's why it feels chaotic, disorienting, even terrifying. Because the ego cannot comprehend a life that doesn't revolve around its stories. It will fight, it will bargain, it will plead. It will tell you that without it, you are nothing. But as those illusions crumble, you discover the unshakable truth. Without them, you are everything. You are the vastness that contains every story, not the character trapped inside one. You are the silence between every thought, not the noise that tries to define you. You are the infinite awareness behind the mask, and that awareness has never known fear. When this realization finally settles into your bones, you stop trying to awaken. You stop trying to heal. You stop trying to become. And instead, you begin to remember. You remember the peace that was present even in your deepest suffering. You remember the love that existed even when you felt most unworthy. You remember the infinite presence that was with you before your first breath and will remain long after your last. And in that remembrance, the search ends, not because you reached the destination, but because you realize you were never not home. And so the invitation is simple, yet profound. Stop running. Stop striving. Stop believing the lie that you are incomplete. Sit in the stillness and let the layers fall away. Let the noise fade. Let the stories dissolve. Because beneath them all, there is something ancient and unshakable, something infinite and whole, and it has been waiting for you to remember. This is not the beginning of a new journey. It is the end of forgetting, and in that ending, everything begins again. The deeper you go into this remembrance, the more you realize that every moment of your life, even the ones you hated, even the ones that broke you, was part of the map leading you back to yourself. Every heartbreak carved an opening where deeper love could enter. Every failure stripped away a layer of false identity. Every betrayal revealed where you had mistaken attachment for connection. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was random. All of it, the chaos, the confusion, the pain, was orchestrated by something within you that never forgot who you were. Even when you did, your soul was never lost. It scattered itself across your experiences so you could gather yourself back together. And when you start to see life through that lens, the entire meaning of awakening shifts. It's no longer a trophy for the spiritually advanced or a reward for the righteous. It's the natural unfolding of what happens when resistance ends. Like a seed that doesn't need to achieve blooming, it simply surrenders to the conditions that allow it. You were never meant to earn awakening. You were meant to dissolve everything that told you you had to. This is also why trauma healing and subconscious reprogramming are not separate from awakening. They are awakening. They are the dismantling of the illusions that made you forget. Trauma is not just pain. It's a story your nervous system wrote about who you needed to be to survive. Reprogramming isn't about becoming someone new. It's about teaching your body that it's safe to return to who it always was. The patterns you call self-sabotage are not flaws. They're outdated survival codes. And each time you rewrite them, you are not evolving, you are remembering. But this process is not gentle. It is not soft. The ego does not die quietly. It thrashes, it resists, it clings. And every step deeper into remembrance will feel like betrayal. Betrayal of who you thought you were. Betrayal of the roles you played. Betrayal of the version of you that worked so hard to hold it all together. Yet this is not betrayal at all. It is devotion. It is love of the highest order. It is the willingness to let falsehood die so the truth can breathe again. And as you surrender to this death, something extraordinary happens. The fear begins to dissolve. The questions that once haunted you, who am I without this pain? What happens if I let go? Will there be anything left of me? Begin to fade. And what remains is silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of fullness. A silence so vast, so ancient, so alive that you realize it has been here all along. It was the backdrop of every experience, the witness of every storm. And it is you. It was always you. From this space, even the unknown ceases to feel threatening, because you see now that what you are cannot be threatened. The unknown is no longer a void to fear. It is a canvas on which your soul paints its next expression. The future is no longer a mystery to solve. It is a memory waiting to be lived. And death itself, that final, terrifying unknown, is revealed to be nothing more than another doorway into remembrance. You begin to understand that what ends is never you. What dies is never the essence. The self that fears the unknown is the same self that was never real. This is why so many who walk this path speak of freedom, not as something gained, but as something uncovered. Freedom is not about having endless choices, it's about no longer being controlled by the illusions that once felt like choices. It's not about being more, it's about needing less. It's not about finding the light, it's about remembering you were never separate from it. And once you taste that freedom, you will never again confuse awakening with becoming. You will know with every fiber of your being that it was always about remembering. So here is the paradox at the heart of your journey. The harder you try to awaken, the further you drift from what you seek. The more desperately you chase wholeness, the more fragmented you feel. But the moment you stop, truly stop, and allow yourself to simply be, the search ends, not because you reached the finish line, but because you realize there was never a race. What you were looking for was never out there. It was the stillness beneath the search, the presence beneath the seeker, the awareness beneath the story, and now you can finally rest.